Good evening, everyone. Chris Hansen here from New York City tonight, and you are having a seat with Chris Hansen on my YouTube channel. As we continue our investigation into the YouTube psycho brat from Washington State known as Onision. Some breaking news tonight to start. We've got some great guests, and we'll get to them in just a moment, but I need to let you know a couple of things. One, Onision released a video today. It was an animated, high-quality video in which he has a conversation with someone who appears to be another YouTube streamer, and at the end, he actually shoots himself in the head, committing suicide. Now, this alarmed so many people, and so many people reported it to the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, which is the jurisdiction where he and Kai, his spouse, live, that the Sheriff's Department actually sent a detective and two deputies to the house. And I can confirm this tonight, that they had an interaction with James Greg Jackson, Onision, the YouTube psycho brat, who was surprised to see them. And obviously this is another attempt on his part to drum up drama and get attention and continue having clicks and views. At the same time, apparently his Instagram page was taken down today by Instagram. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the moments to come. And separately, I have confirmed through the FBI and the survivor we've had on the show before, one of the survivors of Onision and Kai, Sarah, that her two phones and her laptop have officially gone to the FBI in her hometown. And they have been transported to the FBI office in Tacoma, Washington, where they are now under review in what is called a cart examination, where the FBI forensically goes into those phones and computers to get evidence out. This is a big deal. It's taken a long time for it to happen. There was a lot of criticism and concern in the YouTube community that it wasn't happening fast enough, that the computers were sent to us initially for pictures and material. It was ultimately given back to Sarah, then to the FBI. But it is in the FBI's hands now. It is a priority in this investigation, and the FBI is working with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department as the investigation continues into grooming, enticement, potential transmission of child pornography, involving a case against both Onision and Kai. As Sarah said on this show several weeks ago, there was evidence on the computer and the phones of sexually explicit materials that she was enticed to send and were sent to her by Kai and potentially Onision as well. So that's going to be very interesting. That's a very serious federal crime. So it is my pleasure tonight to have two guests on this show. One has been on before, and one is appearing for the first time. Jimmy Snow, who goes on YouTube by the name Mr. Atheist. He is someone who takes a look at cults and cult-like behavior, and we're going to talk to him about how Onision fits into this mold. And someone you know very well, Stevie Wolfe, who spent many years delving into Onision and has a great deal of insight. Guys, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you. Mr. Atheist, where did you get that name, and what is it?
So the name Mr. Atheist, and I know it comes with a lot of baggage, and that's been fun, but it was actually a play on, there was this old video that went viral from a fundamentalist preacher, and he starts his video with, let's do this, dear Mr. Atheist. So I start every episode with, I'm Mr. Atheist, let's do this. That said, I'm not hostile to religion. I frequently collaborate with theists, but I focus on these sort of lifestyle YouTubers that are trying to normalize the idea of religious fundamentalism, religious extremism, and cult-like behavior. So I cover lots of channels like Girl Defined and such over on my channel.
Got it. And Stevie, and I want to ask this question of both of you, but off the top, you guys saw that video today?
Oh, yeah.
Stevie, start with you. What did you think, and what's going on in this guy's mind at this
Well, first, he's not going to work at Pixar anytime soon, but this has been going on for a while with him making content trying to just get under PewDiePie's skin. That's who the other person.
PewDiePie is the other streamer.
Yeah, the other person in the video. And I don't understand it. He's been going in on him for years. He does the same thing with Shane Dawson. He does the same thing with people at a certain tier of YouTube, where they're the certain tier of popularity. I almost wonder if it's jealousy. Does he wish that he had 53 million subscribers? Is that where all this comes from? I don't know. I thought it was bizarre. I thought the ending was bizarre, but that's a motif in a lot of his content where it ends with suicide or has to deal with death, murder, all kinds of stuff like that. He wrote a series of 3 books that were filled with the kind of content.
Do you find it ironic, both of you, Jimmy and Stevie, that he criticizes in one video the drama of YouTube, the narcissistic nature of YouTube streamers, and then he comes back and says, I can't give any more. It's too much pressure. People want too much from me. I'm suffering from depression. And at the end, in a very graphic display, he puts a gun to his head, Jimmy, and pulls the trigger.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with cult personalities, one of the common things that shows up is this profile of the malignant narcissist. And one thing malignant narcissists frequently do is project their own problems and insecurities on everybody else. So if you say, you, Onision, are stupid, he's going to make a bunch of content about why the person criticizing him is stupid. And to me, it's a lot of that. It's criticizing the world so that you can appear like these things even show up on your radar, and so you can avoid the criticism yourself. And so that's what I see. And even with the suicide at the end of the video, to me, it's a call to an implicit call to action of, hey, things are getting really, really bad. I've admitted I use suicide as a tool in the past to be manipulative and get people to do what I want. And I think it is meant to call his supporters to now try and go out and call all the people out for not caring about mental health or something like that, even as they're defending a person who does that themselves. So sort of back to the whole projection thing.
Is this just an attempt, Stevie, by Onision to stay relevant somehow and get people to give him sympathy, to get views, to keep going?
I think it's a cry for attention. I think what he's doing is not just a cry for attention, like, hey, this is really getting serious for me. It's a cry to attention for his content. Keep watching it. Look what he did with the freak out videos. They obviously weren't his real reaction to it. Everybody's question was, why are you behaving this way when you're in the middle of something this serious? He's just milking it for views. He's milking it for attention.
What drives him? What do you think, Stevie, is going on in his mind right now in that home in Washington State? What do you think he's dealing with right now?
I think he's trying to control the narrative the best he can, and he's continuously freaking out, probably behind the scenes, probably not much different than we saw in those videos, because he can't control the narrative anymore. He's had it so easy for the longest time when he had a larger audience, where everything was just under his thumb. Everything was under his control. He could switch and flip the narrative, flip the script, as they say, any which way that he wanted to. And now that he can't, he has no control over it. The entire fan base that he's cultivated for himself, the audience he's cultivated for himself, has turned on him. There's nothing he can do. He's probably not very happy.
Yeah, I would
also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a year from now, we're going to be not just reviewing the stories that we've been now talking about, but we'll be hearing about what was happening in the house to the people around him. Because again, with these people, with this sort of narcissistic personality, when all the world comes crashing down, he might be hiding some of it from us. Obviously, he's not good at hiding much, but he might be hiding some of it from us. And I think in the future, we're going to be hearing about what's happening in this house as he's freaking out, as he's panicked, that the whole facade he's built is falling down.
Jimmy Snow, and I want to get your take on this too, Stevie. Last week, Dr. Lisa Stroman was on, who's a psychologist and a lawyer who had taken a look at some of his videos, and she basically said flat out, this is a guy who's coming apart. This is a guy who can do some damage to himself and others, and the end game may not be a good one for anybody around him. Do you, as somebody who's studied cults, somebody who's familiar with this kind of mentality, this activity, what do you say to that?
So I definitely think that she's spot on in her analysis, but the thing that I would be considerate of is this isn't the first time he's had what he perceives as a lot crashing down around him. And so it may be to him just part of a cycle. His experience in the past is he can charm his way out of it. He can manipulate his way out of it. And I suspect that right now he is sitting thinking he's going to do the same, and he'll start the cycle all over again. He'll once again be restored to lots of adoring fans in the future, not realizing that it seems to me that this time it ends with him in prison, at least if justice can be done. And so I think that while he's going to be panicked, he recognizes the panic as part of the cycle. And again, with the cult leaders thing, cult leaders start mini cults before they get to their big one. And I think that this is just a step in the way.
How was he able to get these young women to do just about anything he asked them to do?
So when you think about who he's targeting and the way he targets them, you're talking about young women who are beginning the transitionary period from teenage adolescence. Parents are driving much of their life to where they are becoming adults. And generally, in a sort of healthy progression, you're going to see a person go from a type of dependence heading toward independence. And he intercepts that and says, basically, let me replace your dad, except that we're going to have a different set of incentives, whether it is psychological validation or in some of the cases of some of the relationships, actual sexual validation.
He calls it a hero complex.
Hero complex. He even admits this, right?
That's what he called it himself. He thinks it's a hero complex.
In reality, I see somebody who likely had a crappy relationship with their dad, and I actually haven't done much research into his relationship with his parents. But yeah, probably a crappy relationship with his dad, who is now trying to fill that dad role in
he had many father figures in and out of his life, so he had a crappy relationship with about 6 different dad figures and a narcissistic mother. His mom was a narcissist, and narcissistic parenting doesn't always lead to very good results, doesn't yield very good results.
Stevie, when was it, if there was a point that he went from an entertainer on YouTube with a following of young people, including a lot of young women, to somebody who was apparently grooming these young women and bringing them into his life in a psychosexual way?
I think it was right after his first divorce. I submit that it happened right during his first divorce, when he separated from his ex-wife. He got with Shiloh. The tumultuousness just bred from there. It just stemmed from there. He started having relationship after relationship after relationship, one right after the other, trying to satisfy his own ego, it seems like. And I think it just spread from there. The more popular he became, the more he realized he could utilize the platform to get what he wanted, really.
And how did Kai develop in all of this, Stevie? And I want to get to you, Jimmy, too, on this subject. Did she start out as somebody who was just kind of an observer, or do you think she was a willing participant from the get-go?
I think she was a willing participant, because we do have evidence that she was tweeting at him obsessively to try to get a hold of his attention. We know also that when they announced that they were getting together, they'd been talking even before then. She was a super fan of his, basically, and went right for it when he announced that he was looking for somebody to settle down with, that he was not wanting to be single anymore. And it just kind of started from there. So I'm very sure that from the beginning, she had to have at least some idea of what she was getting into. I mean, with all the controversy that he's been in, you can't not know about it. You can't just be willingly ignorant to the point you don't think it's a problem unless you legitimately don't think it's a problem.
Yeah.
Are you surprised, Stevie, that this has developed the way it has, that we're now looking at criminal charges, the potential of a civil action, multiple lawyers are involved, at least 3 actually, different law enforcement agencies? Did you ever think that this case would get to this point?
I worried that it would get to this point. I was hoping that it wasn't going to get to this point. But the problem with people like him is there's no de-escalation. Once you start realizing that things are never getting better, they're just going to keep going one step further and one step further and one step further until they hit a brick wall. I was hoping they wouldn't go to this point, but here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Jimmy, what is it about YouTube that allows somebody like this
to succeed?
To succeed?
Yeah, it removes a barrier between people and the celebrities they like. The accessibility of somebody on YouTube, even though it's not necessarily that they seem extremely accessible, it's certainly much less than when you're talking about some major A-list celebrity or whatever. I mean, you feel like communities are built around them that they participate in. And I mean, with Greg, in the case of Greg, he was doing direct things to, I mean, he's rating the bodies and looks of people in a way that is a type of sexual relationship, even if it's not physical at the moment. And he's facilitating those feelings. If you don't mind, I'd actually love to jump back to the Kai thing we were just talking about too.
Please do.
With Kai, this is once again, I'm here on talking about the cult end of stuff. Every L. Ron Hubbard has a David Miscavige.
Right.
Every
L.
Joseph
Ron
Smith
Hubbard is the founder of Scientology, for anybody who doesn't know.
Exactly. Every Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, has an Oliver Cowdery, and these are people that, in the case of David Miscavige was groomed to be in that position. So despite the fact that David starts out as a victim, is now the head of Scientology and is a massive, frankly, a monster. And now I'm on a Scientology website and they'll start targeting me because you can't criticize them publicly.
Pretty much.
You've got, and so even with Kai, who may have started out as the victim in this, he is now in a place where he is mimicking a lot of the terrible behavior, appears to have some of these similar senses of being this grand figure and the right-hand man to Onision. And when you also consider, because we're going to talk a little bit here at some point about the bite model and all of the things you use to evaluate if something is a cult. And when you think about those behaviors applying to a person who, I'm not going to question the authenticity of Kai's transness. I think it's perfectly plausible that he is trans. But as far as going through that transition, which takes on so much and is so such a significant part of a person, especially a trans person's life, and having a person with that amount of control, again, I'm not going to doubt that Kai is trans. However, I will say that Kai's transition is whatever Onision would allow it to be. Whatever
so brings up, and I want to get into the bite model and the cult stuff and the in Siseska, which he tried to start. But Steve, you, Shiloh told me a couple weeks ago that she thought he was trying to turn her into this, boyish model, head shaving and all that stuff. And that when Kai turned a certain age, he expected her to mold into a man. And he also had a continued interest in other younger women who fit that mold, he would then try to transition or have something to do with transition. Does that seem right to you, Stevie?
No, God, no. It doesn't seem right to me that anybody would want to do that. But,
no. But does that seem like? Yeah, no, I know that nobody saying that's a good plan, but it seems like that's a trend with him.
It is. It is a trend with his behavior. He has a huge thing for defeminization. He has a huge thing for body shaming with the videos he was doing, rating girls' bodies. If you can stomach it and watch any of those videos, all they do is shame a woman for her femininity, shame people just for being who they are. And I don't understand it. It has to be something that he was either raised around or something that he had experienced as a kid and just grew up into it. I don't personally claim to understand it. I don't understand where it comes from at all. But with Shiloh, I know that it started with her, and he tried to apparently do the same thing here with Kai. It's the same pattern of behavior.
All right, Jimmy, is this a cult he's running, or is it a cult he's trying to do, and does it fit into this bite model?
Yeah, so let me tell you.
Define a cult. So tell me about that.
So to start with, the bite model is something that was developed by Stephen Hassan. And for many of us who are now ex-cult activists, grew up in cults and are trying to work against cults, we accept it as the best model for evaluating if something is a cult or not. My friend Owen, who runs the channel Telltale, he and I have done these assessments, and he came up with a way of attaching essentially a scoring system as well, because cults aren't equal. There are definitely low-level cults and high-level cults. So when you're talking about mainstream cults, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, these are serious organizations, but then you get to bigger organizations like Scientology, that the extremes of that are much worse. The bimodel is broken up into 4 things: behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. And if you're ready for it, I'm ready to just go through just essentially the categories under each. And this is how I've been evaluating whether or not, it's hard to say he has a cult in the traditional sense, but he seems to have a micro cult around him, and then a broader cult that involves his fans and the people that
Well, I guess he
loyal
also
to him.
puts out the kinds of videos that he's put out.
Yeah.
That wasn't where he's heading. There were at least, if not a firm definition of a cult like Guyana, Jim Jones, and all that, it's certainly parallels there, Jimmy.
Tons. So, for example, if we go under just the first category, behavior control, and we're applying it to him as the cult leader, one of the first things: promotes dependence and obedience. I mean, I don't think anybody who's watched any of the interviews with his past victims could argue that he doesn't do that. It is very much a his way or the highway, and not even the highway, or you're going to be shamed and destroyed, and that comes in later.
His belief in being a vegan or
right,
anything else that he's got going on.
Which that Siseska, when we're talking about the religion, I think that actually more goes toward one of the common things, as I mentioned before, with cult leaders, is they're often malignant narcissists, and they have this very grand vision of themselves. And so Siseska, in a weird way, more fits the malignant narcissism than, because I've never seen them gather and do actual Siseska like gatherings. They had holidays, but it fits more the profile from what you expect of a cult leader than necessarily the bite model itself. But some other things on here: modified behavior with rewards and punishments. We know now the extent to which the punishments were, and it was this kind of when you do this, we need to mark you, show you off, and make you look.
The contract he made Billy sign.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. Let me interrupt you, and I want you to hold that thought, Jimmy, for just one second, because we're going to pick up right there. But
no worries.
Stevie, the contracts, that brings up a good point. Who does this?
Somebody with a serious amount of problems. Somebody that wants a huge degree of manipulation and control over a person, something that can blackmail them with further down the road. He tried to justify it when it was called out, when he was doing with these contracts, when it was exposed. And he tried to make it sound like, well, look, this is what she agreed to by getting with us, which is ridiculous. I mean, nobody would ever have to put up with anything like that. You have something that dehumanizes you and brands you for the rest of your life permanently on your body for one minor thing. I think it was because she was at a concert and somebody had her up on his shoulder so she could see the stage better. And that's the treatment somebody deserves for something that minimized. No,
no legal authority or anything.
Well, no, it's just to break somebody down. It's to break somebody down and make them feel ashamed for one tiny little thing they did to give you more power and more control over them. That's all it is.
Like a contract you'd see, Jimmy, in an actual cult.
The funny thing is with these contracts, his contracts are clearly from someone who doesn't understand contract law. So I see it more as trying to reinforce by the kinds of things you do see in cults and religion, which are things like holy books that are meant to be held to extremely, things like commandments, things like guides, that the individual terms don't actually indicate whether or not you're a good person, but according to the cult's rules, if you abide by the terms, you are now by nature a good person without actually having to justify why it's good. So there's definitely a lot of parallels. And especially when you see like his rule number 1, be honest, which isn't a rule any of us are going to disagree with, but it progresses and it becomes more restrictive.
He certainly didn't follow the rules, which also is consistent with cult leaders. The rules are for everybody else. They weren't for L. Ron Hubbard or the leaders of the cult.
Even cult representatives. There are things that Tom Cruise does that is not considered, it would not be okay for a mainstream Scientologist to do, but because he's a public figure and an ambassador for Scientology, many of those things are.
You have to follow the contract there for 1 billion years.
That's true. That's true. Is it 1 billion? I thought it was actually a 1 trillion year contract. It might
I've heard they were 1 billion year contracts, but
Gotcha. So yeah, and it's funny actually, as I was doing the research, Scientology is what he most represents oftentimes. But if you're ready, I'm ready to keep going down the
Yeah,
list
no,
here.
yeah.
Cool.
Take us through.
Dictate where and with whom you live. You're talking about a guy who got guardianship of one of his victims, and has also restricted who gets to talk to the pre-existing family, which that will come in later too.
Guardianship was involving Sarah, who moved out there at 16 years old.
Yeah, indeed. And so, yes, this is again on the level of the micro cult immediately surrounding him. He hits it big. I don't know to what level he might have told his fans to like not live with people who are critical of things he believes. That's not something that's come up for myself. Stevie, I don't know if you're aware of anything like that.
Yeah, he basically tried to shill against people like myself and anyone else who made content against him so hard that it's what you see with Scientology, where they try to discredit people that discredit them by making all kinds of bizarre statements or websites. Or I believe in some cases, if you leave Scientology, don't they like harass you by following you around with cameras and stuff everywhere you go?
That's an interesting point. And again, Jimmy, we'll get back to your list. But in this case, you've got Onision, who has gone after you, Stevie. He's gone after me, Repsion. And these, this baseless attempt to get a court protection order, which was just, laughable. Yep. But he is then taken off after some of the survivors here in a very vicious way. He gained information, and this is what I see as a parallel to some of these other cult-like religions where they have you confess everything you did and everything bad and traumatic that's happened to you. Mm-hmm. And just like Onision, they use it against you. And when these women have left and then spoken out to me or somebody else or to the authorities, he takes this information that he's gathered and brutally sticks it to him.
That comes in under the information control section. It is these confession sessions that happen. Whereas he's doing it under the guise of the relationship, where it's gathering. It feels like, so like with Scientology, you go into these things and you're confessing to get the weight lifted off you. And similarly to some of the tactics we've heard about from him, they won't accept that you're done telling them confessions, that it's okay, but what really? Tell me more. You're leaving something out. And then once you leave, in the case of Scientology, it's actual websites put up about you, discrediting you. Even David Miscavige's father went on a small YouTube channel last year to give an interview, and Scientology sent them a statement trying to discredit David Miscavige's father. And so the equivalent of that just done in Greg's cult of I'm going to make videos, and now it's on the internet. That's forever. You are forever this person. And forever people will be able to find me saying this about you. It is meant to be, it's used as an initial way to gain trust by members of the cult and to make them feel better, because now they've told somebody something so deep and secret and they weren't judged for it until later when it becomes a useful weapon.
And then it's a punishment.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just kind of run through the rest of behavior control fast, because I think most people will can think of some of the examples off the top of their head. But just under behavior control, restrict or control sexuality, obviously. Control clothing and hairstyle. And we talked about this in the punishments and and even I think Shiloh was even saying he would tell her what to wear for her concerts and stuff as she was going out and performing. Regulate what and how much you eat and drink. This one, obviously, with the veganism, also there were restrictions on the use of cannabis on some of the people. Deprive you of 7 to 9 hours of sleep is under behavior control. This is one I don't know of any examples of. Stevie, if you do, that would be a question for you. Has he ever, with his victims, restricted their sleep? Because that's a
I would assume you don't get a lot of sleep in his household, because he doesn't appear to have a normal sleep schedule anyway. When you look at the content that he uploads, he has a uploading schedule, so it goes up at a certain time, but when it's filmed, he's up at all hours of the day and night. I don't know if that's intentional or just part of whatever it is that's wrong with him, where he doesn't get a normal sleep schedule. But yeah, I don't know.
Is
Yep.
he, Stevie, based upon what you know and historically about Greggy James Onision, is he slowly unraveling, going mad in a way?
I think that whatever it is that is psychologically wrong with him is becoming worse, and I think that he's accelerating. I think that he's had something wrong with him his entire life, and I think that to some degree his family had to have known. You can't have the issues that he obviously displays and nobody just knows. You don't just ignore it.
Yep.
And I think that by not having something done about it, getting them the therapy and the help that he needs, it just slowly got worse over time. And with the world closing down on him now, and he's completely out of control of it, it's out of his control. I think it's just going to accelerate more and more and more. I think we're seeing now he's in a very bad part of a downward spiral.
What's his day like, do you suppose?
He gets up in the morning and immediately goes on social media to scour any negative thing that's said about him. I mean, that's been actually told to me multiple times by multiple people that's pretty much all he does. He just looks up all the negative things people say about him to try to find some counter argument to it rather than just ignore it and go on with his day.
And Kai, what's Kai doing during all of this?
I don't know at this point. I know that she used to control some of his social media, that they'd have shared accounts, that she would try to control the narrative too. I mean, we do know that
he,
huh?
Kai now being a he.
Now being, yeah. So Kai, that they would have control over certain social media and certain accounts. They try to control the narrative as well. So they're complicit with it as well.
So, Jimmy, following the cult model here, cult-like model here in this case, so he's got to feel the pressure. I came knocking on his door. The police showed up at that house or had police-related calls some 19 times in 2019 alone. What happens to a guy of this mentality when his egotistical, narcissistic world starts to close in on him?
I think that, yes, you're going to see him lash out more. Yes, you're going to see the tactics become more dire. But again, in talking about the malignant narcissist profile, I don't think there's going to be a moment, even if he is sitting in prison, which, I mean, I'll be honest, that's what I'm hoping for. Even if he's sitting in prison, that he won't think he's going to figure out a way out of it all. He believes himself so brilliant. You see this also, and it's another bite model thing. You see the way he reduces these complex ideas to extremely simple platitudes. He explains there's an arrogance on his face as he tells people like things that he couldn't even be an expert on. For the love of God, this is a guy who did a video on how black women should do their hair and believes he is the expert on it. This is a person who does not believe his expertise knows any bounds and will always believe he has been wronged and that he will figure out, manipulate his way out. He will trick his way out of the situation.
Stevie, we know today, and I mentioned this earlier, and take me into some detail on it, but his Instagram account was taken down.
His Instagram was taken down for bullying and harassing content. He tried to circumvent it by making another, and within 20 minutes, that was taken down for violent content. I don't know what it was that he posted on there that was specifically violent, but somebody had it reported for it, and within 20 minutes, it was taken down.
What was the bullying behavior, if you know?
The bullying behavior was some of these antagonistic posts that he makes towards people that are critical of him. And I believe it was reported under that context.
And they finally took him down. Does it surprise you that these social media platforms are now finally cracking down?
It doesn't surprise me that they don't want to be associated with somebody like him. I think that some of these social media platforms may have had issues with him in the past being on their platform. The one that bothers me the most is YouTube because it doesn't do anything about it. This is the main platform that he's held for years and years now, and nothing, absolutely nothing, not so much as a peep.
How he got the fame was YouTube.
Yeah, and all they do is give him more and more and more of a platform by allowing him to control his narrative by manipulating the DMCA system, filing copyright claims against people, taking their videos down if he doesn't like what they have to say in it by claiming their content just because they used a 10-second clip in it.
Well, it's to me that he has manipulated the YouTube system in just about every way. And I've tried very hard to get Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, and or a representative to talk about this. And I had an email exchange just yesterday with YouTube. And what I had said to them was, there's evidence that he has manipulated the system because of his early entry into YouTube, because of his status as a major player on YouTube, that he had access to certain tools and abilities to do things that very few other people have. And he's been able to manipulate this and to sort of centralize his power, to be able to attack others, to be able to copyright strike others, and to really solidify his power base on YouTube. Do you buy that?
I think that, which one of us did you want to answer first? If you want to answer first, Jimmy, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I wouldn't, as I see, for that specific thing, I think that's a little more extravagant than it needs to be, because I look at my own past on YouTube. Last year, my channel and some other channels in our community went to war with a cult called the New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist. We got them designated a hate group by the SPLC, and these are the people who have sort of replaced like Westboro for the kill. I'm a member of the queer community, so this is why I went to war with the new representatives of the Kill All Queers movement. And this is an organization and a group that is growing. And we got some of their channels actually taken down. We got some of their content taken down. We got some of their financial. You had these other people like PayPal and even some tithing sorts of PayPals, like religiously oriented ones, to cut off their funding. Because I'm very cautious with deplatforming, but when you say murder a marginalized group, that's when I become pissed off. And the leader of this cult, if you make a video right now where you share certain clips of his YouTube videos from the past, you will get a strike. But the leader of this cult, his name is Steven Anderson, is still currently active on YouTube. So expecting YouTube to step it up with Greg, I would not hold my breath for.
So wait a minute. Explain this to me. This guy who is spewing hate and violence against minorities, the LGBTQ community, he can take somebody else down, even though he's been recognized as a.
He doesn't have to. There are videos of his that automatically strike you because the algorithm knows they're hate videos. So if I were to put up a video of him, one of them is him talking about if he had a button that could kill every queer on the planet, he'd break his finger mashing it. And if you show that on your channel while criticizing him, you will automatically get a content strike because it is in YouTube's system. It recognizes it and it says, no, absolutely not. But this guy's channel is still allowed to live on the platform.
Stevie, what are the developer toolkits for YouTube and Google? And is this something that Onision can use to
I know people at his level, they have access to different tools and people where I'm at. So I'm only floating around like about maybe 40,000 subscribers right now. He is in the millions. I know that once you get to a certain point, you have access to different tools than other YouTubers. That's been the way it's been for years now. Mm-hmm. You have also people that work within the YouTube creators circle, people at YouTube that are actually more willing to help you with striking people and getting strikes turned over that are done on your content, people at your own network as well that do that. I think having that kind of access, I mean, it's beneficial if you're willing to use it correctly, but if you give it to somebody like this, they're just going to abuse it.
Do you think he is this powerful because of when he got involved here and because of how much money he made for?
Yes, I do. He was one of the first big YouTubers, like big in the sense where he was a huge collaborator. He got a lot of views. I mean, when this all became a big thing on the internet, YouTube was still new. It was new content. People could make this kind of stuff from home. They didn't have to be tied to like a TV network or something like that. So I feel that when Google acquired YouTube, they saw this as an opportunity to be like, you know what, we can brand a lot with this. Let's give these people some extra access to keep their content more relevant because we're making money now off this.
Do you think that Google is afraid of Onision?
I think they're afraid of the PR backlash that'll happen when this all finally comes to a conclusion. Susan will have to answer for it, because how can you not? When somebody like this goes to jail after utilizing your platform as a vehicle to do the things that he's done, obviously people are going to ask you, if you're the CEO of the platform that it is, they're going to ask you, why did you allow this to happen? Why didn't you do anything? And I think that they're afraid of that backlash because they have no justifiable answer. Well, or they have not at least any good answer.
It's coming, though.
Mm-hmm.
It seems inevitable given the criminal investigations, given who's involved, given the evidence that's been collected, given the potential for, civil litigation and potential civil litigation against YouTube, Google in this case.
I mean, they're facing a lot of lawsuits.
Right. I mean, if they allow this to happen, theoretically, they could be held accountable. Now, I understand nobody's going to fight for the First Amendment more than I will. I get that. But at some point, common sense, if you see a litany of victims and survivors, as we've seen in this case, it seems like there's some corporate responsibility here.
It's also worth noting the First Amendment is not a guarantee of platform. It's a guarantee you're not going to be arrested for your speech. It's a guarantee the government's not going to come back at you. The First Amendment, while I think on a public platform like this, we should err on the side of caution and try and have as many points of views and opinions out there as possible, when these are things that are clearly and explicitly harmful, like organizations like what Onision has created, less an organization and more a mini cult. When these things are harmful, the First Amendment defense, I've heard it a bunch of times, even back in that NIFB war, I was talking about the concept that we're violating their First Amendment rights, and that's not what the First Amendment is there for. The founders had no YouTube in mind when it came to the First Amendment.
Stevie, what do you think it says that this latest video of his, and all the videos are so hard to watch, I've had to watch some of them. Thankfully, there are people who watch them and, sort of give me the lowdown on it, and I watch them after. But the fact that he went into an animated program in this video, what does that say to you, Stevie?
He's trying to circumvent having to be on camera, which I think is an interesting way to do it, because isn't it just more sophisticated to do it that way than just stand in front of a camera? And it should be noted, for people that don't know, the program he's using to animate these videos is primarily used for making 3D animated porn more than it is anything else.
Somebody was telling me that today, who's more knowledgeable in this area than I am, that's what this software, this technology is used for.
Yeah, that's mainly what it's used for. You can obviously use it for other things, but the main usage for it is for making 3D animated pornography. That's what it is. It's an open source program. I forget the name of it, but it's free to download. It's free to use, and people primarily use it for that more than they use it for whatever he's using it for, which oddly enough doesn't really shock me all that much.
Jimmy Snow, if you could have him on your show and ask him one question, what would you say to Onision?
It's hard to say, because, again, with the kind of person he is, you wouldn't expect an honest answer out of him. I would want to know something regarding his victims and whether any of his feelings of remorse or these things that he supposedly projects are authentic. But I guess if I just have the one question, it would be, can I pick your psychologist and can we go there now? Because I wouldn't expect a true response on anything else.
Steve, yeah. You.
I'd ask him, so when did this all start for you? Because it's academic at this point. This is just how he's been his entire life, with the grooming and the manipulation and the abusive, narcissistic personality. I just asked, where did it all start? When did it all start? What made you feel that this was a great way to handle your problems? Or when did you start noticing that this was a part of your personality and your behavior? If he was willing to answer it honestly, just ask him direct.
I was contacted by one of his high school classmates who stayed in touch with him for a period of time and has not been close to him in a couple of years, who essentially said, he was this way on a lesser scale, even in high school. It was always his way. He was going to convince you that his way was right, that this person, she saw the seeds of this, 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago.
But this is a person who uses the same terminology you see like skeptic communities using, like reason and logic, but is dependent on reducing his ideas to simple platitudes and just sort of dictating them to you as a kind of, this is obvious. If you don't believe it, it's stupid. This is a person who is so contrary to it was even the tagline of his religion. It was Seseska, when reason dies, so do we, or something like that. And this is a person who is so antithetical to that idea.
What does that even mean? What,
Here's a question for you, Stevie. Without YouTube, where is Greg James today?
Without YouTube?
Yeah, without YouTube.
Where would he be if he didn't have YouTube? Is what you're okay? Well, I don't know where he'd be, but probably just on some obscure website, still trying to cultivate an audience for himself. People like this, they need the attention. I mean, didn't Marshall Applewhite just release all his stuff on VHS when he was doing his thing, Jimmy?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to people like this, it's just like when they don't have the platform of the internet, or they don't have something that's as broadly reaching as this, it's like, how do they get their message out there? They go to where people are more than likely to listen to it. With what you're talking about with this Baptist thing, that makes a lot of sense to me, because they're going to go cultivate an audience and people that just want to go to church and listen to what they have to say, regardless of the message. And then they're just going to be hive-minded straight to it.
Yeah, he'd have found an apple box somewhere.
Yeah,
and would have been attracted to positions of. So I worked as a professional photographer for some time, and a lot of people who get into professional photography get in because they're predatory, because they are.
Well, we saw the case, ironically, in the Washington State area of the woman who was allegedly trying to steal a baby and had gone on social media advertising herself as a photographer who needed, a book of pictures. And a woman they come over to a woman's house who's got a baby they're supposed to photograph. They give her a poisoned cupcake with the intent of stealing the child. Now, ironically, this is in the same jurisdiction. It's the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, the same Sheriff's Department investigating this case, that had to deal with that.
The unfortunate reality, though, is there is an audience ready to receive people like Greg. There is an audience. There are other people on the platform that I won't even have to say their names, but there are other people who are very clearly narcissistic. We don't know whether or not they're also grooming people or if they're predatory in the same way, but who have the same kind of approach and presentation, and their audiences. They find their audience eventually. So when you have that personality and you're willing to put in the time and you're willing to consistently put out stuff, it's almost a matter of just the way social media has brought everybody to the internet. He was almost destined for success in the type of success he found. I think that if he started over and had never existed and started again, he would also succeed again. There are people that you can just kind of tell are going to do well, whether or not doing well is actually a positive thing or not. So I think even if he wasn't on YouTube, his YouTube channel was never going to fail, because cult leaders like him can find an audience.
It's like what Shiloh said. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's like what Shiloh said. People are famous because they move and behave and act in a certain way. Like, they don't have to be particularly talented in any given thing. It's, if you look good on camera, you're going to probably do well on camera.
Yep.
How many other victims do you think are out there, Stevie?
Oh, God, I couldn't even put a number on it. People like this tend to just cultivate so many people to themselves, even if they don't actually, even if he wasn't able to get them to his house, there still has to be something going on with more women than we know about.
And his victim list, certainly, if we're talking about just the victims of people he groomed, brought, and had sexual experiences with, certainly maybe that's something that could be numbered. But when you're talking about the emotional and intellectual impact he's had on especially a huge group of young girls as they're watching him rate other women's bodies as they are listening to his advice about if they're an assault victim, they should be ashamed of themselves if they didn't act in certain ways. The amount of damage he's created and the types of victims he's created is going to be in the hundreds of thousands.
I have heard from young women around the world who never met him in person but feel as though they were victimized because of communications they had with him, had with Kai, the grooming, the demeaning nature of some of these conversations. I mean, I wonder if sometimes if we'll ever find the true extent. Stevie, Onision says that, and this is close to being a quote, all YouTubers are narcissistic losers to get jobs.
Okay, well, that's a fun thing. That's a funny thing to say coming from him. I don't know if he's talking about himself, but he freaks out about the money that he loses on YouTube, yet he puts all of his eggs in one basket. He doesn't have any career opportunities out this or try to cultivate any skills outside of this. Like, I work in technology. YouTube is not the only way that I make a living because I don't make a living off this. So to say that all YouTubers are narcissistic losers, well, guess what? People diversify their interests. They diversify their business. They don't just do one thing. So I think that's a pretty tall statement from him.
I'm definitely a loser. I hope I'm not a narcissist. He's at least half right. Yeah.
What do you think the end game is here, Stevie, for him?
I think the end game is just to be cultivating as much attention as he can. I think he just wants to be watched no matter what it is. I think he wants to feel wanted by people.
And control.
Yeah.
He wants to control people. I think that again, getting back to malignant narcissism, that is the most validating thing you have as a narcissist. Not just that you are as great as you think you are, but you can make other people abandon their autonomy and work on behalf, or behave in the way you've decided for them. I think that's, if he lost that in his immediate circle, that's when you would see his biggest crash.
You gave me an astonishing figure when it came to the amount of money, Stevie, you estimated that Greg James earned on YouTube back in the heyday. What do you suppose he's getting today?
He's barely making anything to scrape on by. As far as we know, that he's not shifting his money around. And with all the different businesses that he has, we found out about one last night we didn't even know that he had in 2013. He could be making about $1,000, $2,000 a month now, based on what he was earning previously from YouTube. But he might have finances he's just shifting around through LLCs and such.
As I pull up his daily numbers just on Onision Speaks, I would suspect if he's maintaining keeping episodes monetized, which that's a big if, but if he's maintaining, even if he's not maintaining monetization, I'd put the number higher. If he's maintaining monetization, he's making still 5 figures, low 5 figures, but 5 figures, like literally around the 10K. I don't think he is. So he's much more likely in the 2,000 to 3,000 area, I would guess, off of just AdSense.
Hard to sustain a good living with a family and cars and a home and everything else at the level he's at now, unless he's got something else going on. And
his exuberance never stops. He never stops buying exuberant things that he doesn't need. Yeah. Like when he had the bigger house before he moved to where he's living at now, he didn't have just one, he had 2. He had another house that was as large as that he used just to film in. Like instead of using an area of the house as a set, he just bought another home as a set and had 2 $110,000 Teslas on top of it and all his video equipment and everything. The man's spending is out of control. I hope he doesn't ever find gambling. He'd be the wildest gambling addict ever.
All right, gentlemen, final thought tonight. Where do we go from here? What's the next step for him, do you think, Stevie?
Well, the next step from here, I hope, is some kind of incarceration, or at least he gets indicted for something. This needs to stop. He needs to stop using this platform as a vehicle to hurt people. YouTube needs to take accountability for allowing him to use this as a vehicle to do the things that he's done. And they should at least have the stones to come on your show. Susan should come on your show and talk to you about this instead of just avoiding it, at every road. They want it in their ball court. I don't like that. They want to be able to say their words that they want to say and not actually be asked a direct question.
I offered to come to them, and it doesn't even have to be live. I would do it on tape. That's not a problem. They know that. So we're going to keep trying. Jimmy, final thoughts?
Yeah, as far as the what's next goes, this is my first time speaking out against Onision publicly, so I imagine I'm at least a small part of his what's next.
Well, maybe he'll take you to court to try to get a personal.
Yeah, hopefully
could be.
not.
if the pattern holds, I'd expect something. What I hope that people are finding more as they are coming across this, the important thing about the Onision situation isn't just Onision, it's that lots of people like him are out there. So I think, I hope that people, even if it's not literally the bite model they're learning how to identify somebody who is so predatory. They're learning to identify people who are manipulative, and that it would be excellent if Susan would have the sit down with you and we could start promoting good information, not just easy to click information that is frankly targeted toward teenagers whose minds are moldable and who keep falling for, not all of them, but keep falling for some of the worst stuff on here. And so I hope that's what's next. But again, it's with YouTube, it's hard to hold your breath. And I make my living off of YouTube, but I still recognize that they're not great in this regard.
All right, Jimmy, thank you very much for being on. Stevie, as always, a pleasure. We'll have you guys back on again, I promise. And I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us about all this stuff. Another interesting night of Have a Seat looking into the Onision cases. One thing I want to share with you guys tonight, as you may know, a fellow who used to work with me on some of these projects is no longer with me. And he and some other guys, I'll describe as, kind of crass morons, have taken a Facebook page that looks to be mine, my image, Have a Seat. Now, there is a Have a Seat with Chris Hansen Facebook page that's attached to this channel, and it's legitimate. But there's another one that this fellow put together, and I feel very strongly about this. I can take criticism. I've been in this business a long time. But what they've done here is they've used hate speech to target the African American community and the LGBTQ community. I'm not going to stand for this, not one bit. And to use that on a platform in a cowardly way, especially the way they're doing it, on a Facebook page that has my name on it, my images, is absolutely outrageous. We've filed complaints with Facebook. I know hundreds of you have done the same thing. And still, Facebook refuses to take any action here. We have sent a cease and desist letter to Vincent and to his sister, who's an attorney. No response yet. Now, I have brought this attention to the attorney, his sister, and nothing has happened. I've sent emails. And the emails are not just complaining about this activity. The emails are literally begging her to get her brother help before he harms himself or someone else. So the lack of response tells me two different things, potentially. One, she complies with his wishes, believes his lies, or is complicit in his beliefs, or because he acts as her IT person, those emails, those pleas for help are not being seen because they're being intercepted. So I want everybody to think about that. And I want everybody to do something else too. We're going to put up the fake Facebook address. And I'm going to put it up on Twitter after the show. And I want every single one of you to complain to Facebook. Complain about this. Report it as a fake website engaging in hate speak, which has in the past targeted the African American community, one specific African American YouTuber, YouTube streamer in particular, and the LGBTQ community. I want you to do this. And when I get off the show, I'm going to put the tweet out of the fake Facebook page. And you can see the runner, the words beneath on this screen, which one is mine and which one is the fake one. So do that for me, please. Let's take a stand against this hate speak, against this moronic, useless, stupid behavior. Now, he'll figure out another way to say some stupid things, to put up some goofy cartoons and some graphics. They're not even funny. It's sad, really. Pathetic. So we're going to move on. I'm not going to talk about this much more. It's all in the hands of the legal system now. You'll probably see and hear more. in other places. But we're going to continue here on this channel to pursue justice for the victims, survivors in this case, and to bring somebody to justice, as we've mentioned many times, who is allegedly engaged in reprehensible behavior on this very social platform and elsewhere. So that's my message to you tonight. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining myself and Jimmy Snow and Stevie Wolfe in an engaging conversation on this topic. We're going to stay on this, and I'll see you next week on Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. Thanks very much. Take care. Have a wonderful week. See you soon.